What would you like to be known for? In the first century, a servant of Jehovah named Philip was known as the evangelizer. In the following dramatization, we'll learn how Philip earned this reputation and what we can apply from his good example.
Please find your seats. It's time to start our graduation program.
We never dreamed this would happen.
This is a very special day all of us have been anxiously waiting for. We're happy to see all of you here.
It all started a few years ago.
If you'd like to have the circuit overseer and his wife for a meal, please see.
It was during that visit and this question.
His theme on Tuesday is, what lessons can we learn from Philip, the evangelizer?
What could we learn from Philip? Honestly, we were already busy with the right things. Lily and the girls helped out wherever they could. I worked on Kingdom Hall maintenance projects. And we had a regular schedule for the ministry. But like in a lot of places, when someone showed interest, it was tough to find them again. I wondered if our spiritual routine needed an update.
So we're watching a dramatization in the April JW Broadcasting episode about Philip the Evangelizer, and the idea is that this family needs to learn from the Bible example of Philip from the New Testament in improving their service to Jehovah. And we've just had a clue there of how they're falling short in some way, because even though this is apparently a super-duper family of Jehovah's Witnesses who are doing everything that's expected of them, there's still more that they can do. And this fits in perfectly with the talk that Jehovah's Witnesses will just have seen in the April episode, where Samuel Hurd is just reminding them every which way that they are failures unless they're living up to his impossible expectations. Well, the expectation here is that you should be prolific in your ministry to the point where everyone you encounter who expresses an interest, you should be visiting them enough so that they're home inevitably at some point when you call back. That's what this guy is doing wrong here. So when he suggests that, oh, there could be room for improvement perhaps, even though I'm regular in my preaching, I guess it's not quite regular enough, because when I call back as my schedule allows, as my work pattern allows, I'm missing people. I'm not able to speak to them. What he means is I need to be doing less work somehow so that I'm more available, so that I can call at more times of the day and therefore get more people at home and be more prolific in recruiting people into the organization.
This is interesting. Because of the persecution, Philip had to flee from Jerusalem to Samaria. Samaria hadn't accepted the word of Jehovah yet. But Philip saw that trial as a spiritual opportunity.
Samaria was largely untouched by the preaching work. Philip declared the good news zealously, and many believed and got baptized. But sometime later, an angel spoke with him. He told Philip to get up and go to the south. That led him to find the Ethiopian eunuch and preach in other cities. Philip was willing to serve wherever there was a need.
And he always kept that evangelizing spirit. Some 20 years later, he was still known as the evangelizer.
So the clear message here for Jehovah's Witnesses is that they need to have the evangelizing spirit like Philip, and like Philip, they need to be willing to serve wherever there is a need. That's the message that the organization wants Jehovah's Witnesses to take home from this dramatization. But I find it very interesting for another reason. You have this scene depicted where an angel visits Philip, flooding the house with light. That's apparently what angels do. That's how you know it's an angel, because there's lights everywhere. Therefore, it must be an angel. Anyway, Philip gets visited by an angel, and the angel instructs him to go south, and he ends up meeting the Ethiopian eunuch. Watchtower wants us to think about this story. They want Jehovah's Witnesses to think about this in terms of what it entails for their careers as evangelizers. I'm fascinated by this for another reason, because if you think about it, what we've just seen here contradicts the organization's narrative about the governing body. We've had an individual in the first century, a first century Christian, being sent on an assignment not by the governing body, but by an angel. And yet, as recently as the 2020 annual meeting, Tony Morris was getting on stage or getting on camera and telling millions of Jehovah's Witnesses that first century Christians needed a governing body in Jerusalem to tell them what to do.
Contrary to some who oppose Jehovah and the earthly part of his organization and claim there was no governing body in the first century, and hence they see no need for a governing body today, a governing body was formed at Pentecost of 33 CE, more than 18 centuries before the Pennsylvania Corporation came into existence. At first, the governing body consisted of 12 apostles. Its number was enlarged later, for the apostles and older men in Jerusalem were taking the lead. Now notice, then indeed, the congregations continued to be made firm in the faith and to increase in number day by day. Isn't that beautiful? There was a governing body. They didn't have a need for legal entities to advance the kingdom work in the first century, but they did indeed need a governing body.
They did indeed need a governing body, they being first century Christians. Well, it looks like at least one first century Christian didn't need a governing body, because Philip is here taking his instructions directly from an angel. So why have a governing body? Why is a central ruling authority in Jerusalem needed if people like Philip and people like the Apostle Paul were receiving their instructions directly from heaven? Why have a governing body? I love this about the organization, because they're liars And the thing about lying is the more you do it, the more your lies start to unravel. Because your lies have to correspond with each other. Your lies have to match up. And inevitably they won't, because they're fiction. You've made it all up. And inevitably, the more lies you tell, the more your lies aren't going to corroborate each other. So Tony Morris, in the annual meeting, there was a governing body because that's what Christians needed. And here we are in the April broadcasting episode. Yeah, at least one Christian in the first century didn't need a governing body to tell him what to do because he received his instructions direct from the angels, telling him where to go and where to preach. So, yes, worth revisiting Tony Morris's words. I actually did a sushi debunking this claim that Jehovah's Witnesses need a governing body because the first century Christians needed a governing body. It's in this sushi, which will appear around about here. Watch it if you haven't seen it already, especially if you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses and you've been falling for this idea that God, if he exists, needs a governing body to tell you what to do, a governing body consisting, coincidentally, of Tony Morris and his pals.
By that time, his life had changed. He was a family man with 4 daughters. But that didn't stop him from showing hospitality when Paul and his companions came to visit. Visits like that must have been full of spiritual lessons for his daughters.
That night, we came up with a few things we wanted to do.
We started by having the circuit overseer to lunch. We hadn't made time for that in a while.
Alex and Carla's experiences made the girls excited to reach their own spiritual goals. But, like Philip, changes came that we didn't expect. I was out of work for a few months. It was a stressful time, but also a spiritual opportunity. I could visit people at different times of the day. We tried to make the most of the situation and preach zealously. Like Philip. And here we are, watching our girls graduate from the School for Kingdom Evangelizers. Those few lessons made a big difference for this family of evangelizers.
So this goes back to what I was saying earlier about this guy doing his best in the preaching work, having a spiritual routine where he was fully involved in trying to recruit people into the Jehovah's Witness religion, fitting it in with his work schedule, but ultimately finding that because he was calling at certain times, he wasn't able to find people at home when he called back for whatever reason. And this was a failing on his part. This was an area in which he could be doing more. And now at the end of this dramatization, we find out what it was that he should have been doing more. First of all, we find out that he should have been having the circuit overseer round for lunch, because the circuit overseer could remind him and his family of all the fabulous opportunities there are for those who are reaching out. Opportunities, by the way, that are considerably more abundant if you happen to be a man, because it's not like girls can be circuit overseers. I'm not sure how helpful Lunch with a Circuit Overseer is from that perspective. If you're a girl and you're sat there listening to all these anecdotes about how fabulous circuit overseer life is, and your only way of achieving this life, of becoming a circuit overseer's wife, is to marry a circuit overseer. That's the standard that they should be reaching to. They should be looking to marry a circuit overseer if they want to be invited to people's homes to regale others with these encouraging stories. That's the role model. That's the ultimate example that they should be reaching for. But they find an alternative. They decide to go through the School for Kingdom Evangelizers, which is the modern iteration of what I went through, the Ministerial Training School. They've changed it quite a bit since I went, and now you can go, even if you are a sister. It used to be brothers only. Now sisters can go as well, which I suppose is some kind of progress. But ultimately, it's all about turning people into evangelizers, making people more useful to the organization. And that's the moral of the story. Are you making yourself available to the organization to do the things the organization needs you to do in order for more to get recruited into the organization? It's clearly all about benefiting the organization rather than benefiting the individual. Classic example, this guy who started off wondering how he could do more, wondering how he could find people at home, he loses his job, and because he is this super duper spiritual man that Jehovah's Witnesses should be looking up to as a role model, he sees losing his job as, quote, a spiritual opportunity.
I was out of work for a few months. It was a stressful time, but also a spiritual opportunity.
Oh dear, you've lost your job, but never mind. This means that you can do more preaching. That's the message here. This is where this guy was falling short. He had a job. His job was holding him back. And by losing it, it meant that he could preach more. That's what you're supposed to do as a Jehovah's Witness, with a family no less. If you lose your job, don't spend your time trying to get a new job. And we all know, those of us who aren't on the writing team, or those who are responsible for putting this propaganda together and who don't live in the real world, those of us who do live in the real world know how this works. When you lose your job, if all you're going to do is do preaching work, you're going to be permanently unemployed. Because the thing you need to do when you lose your job is spend lots and lots of time finding a new one, applying for new jobs, finding out where the vacancies are, firing off emails, firing off letters, going on websites and filling in forms, attending interviews, getting rejected from a good number of those interviews, and eventually one of those interviews will result in you having a new job. But oh no, Jehovah's Witnesses, in that situation, here's your spiritual opportunity to go out and recruit more people into the organization. Never mind if your cupboards are empty. Never mind if you're destitute. At least the organization's needs are being met.